One. Here we go. I always feel like a game show host when I'm starting these episodes. So, um, first question out of the box, uh, Karis, is this: you have a very unique niche. How in the world did you take these two fields of being an animal behaviorist, if that's the terminology, and then you morph it into family mediation, and you help families who are going through separation, could be divorce, um, and you help them try and figure out what's best for their pets. How in the world did this all come about? What was that aha moment?
It was many little aha moments, Tommy. It I As an animal behaviorist, for listeners who don't know what that is, that's someone who um, understands how and why dogs behave in interesting ways. Interesting being everything from like peeing on the couch to attacking people and doing, dangerous sort of behaviors, everything you can imagine. So people call me when they're having problems with their dogs. My bad joke is I say no one ever calls me when things are going well. So I always see sort of families in
Yeah.
in times of stress from kind of varying degrees with their animals. So over the years, I was seeing families after the divorce or after the boyfriend and girlfriend had separated. It doesn't have to be a actual marriage. And I was seeing animals who were very stressed because of what had happened at the divorce or the separation, and the decision that had been made didn't suit the animal. It suited the people at the time for whatever reason. And all of the cases I see have an interesting backstory. So, I would just plonk those in, the file with everything else. But I started to see a pattern. I was like, wait a minute. There's a lot of dogs and families too that are suffering, 1 month, 3 months, 3 years later because of this divorce decision. And one of my big ahas was that my mom was a divorce mediator. So when I was growing up, my whole, our whole kind of awareness around divorce was mediation and how mediation worked so well and how it just allowed people to resolve things rather than creating a fight that maybe wasn't necessary. So I was chatting to my mom and I was like, "Mom, what do divorce mediators do about dogs?" And she said, "Well, nothing." It sort of is a joke. So that you could say was my aha moment. And I thought nobody is actually working in this space who, or no one that I know of, who has my background in animal psychology and animal behavior and dog training. And so I decided to make that my niche and I became a family mediator. So I'm also a divorce mediator. So I have um, that kind of context and background with all the work that I do. And yes, now I am the most niche person I know. And when I tell people what I do, they laugh. Like, oh, everybody, they go, "What? No, you don't." And then they go, "Oh, wait, hang on, that's brilliant." that's like that's the conversation I have with everybody when I tell them what I do.
Well, that's fine because that was going to be my follow-up question: is how do people react? Do they look at you like you have a third eye, or like you just said, "Oh my God, that's brilliant."
Yeah, but don't that's how all new ideas happen, right? Everybody
Mhm.
resists new ideas and then suddenly they go, "Oh, everybody knew that." So I kind of feel like I mean, I love being able to do these podcasts because really people literally don't know that there's somebody doing this or that there's even a need for it, really. The animals in divorce, it's very very much about um the people, even as some laws in certain states are changing to sort of see animals to take their well-being into account, um, it doesn't go far enough, in my opinion, in terms of what that actually means. What is the welfare of the animal that you're actually trying to take care of?
Well, that's a great segue into the news article from ABC News that you helped contribute to. And Alaska, California, and my original home state of Illinois, are among states that have erected laws giving judges leeway to consider the best interest of pets, not unlike what they do for children. A bill is pending in New York State to take the same approach. That's from the ABC News article that I will have in the show notes. So, I mean, it really is an interesting job that you do, and it's really to me, when I read the article, I was surprised that there were actually three states that, in my opinion, my view, um, are very progressive on that. And you would think there would be more states trying to do this as well, but I'm
I
scratching my
think
head
so.
because
I
it's
know.
insane.
And I think, Tommy, for context, we should just like let people know a little bit. Like, in most states, except for those ones that you mentioned, animals are considered property. Legally, they're considered property, which means they're in the exact same category as your toaster and your car. So if people are dividing up, if they are in a courtroom and a judge is deciding for the couple, if they're unable to, if they have lawyers instead of mediation, a mediator or whatever, um, that is the category that animals fall into. And so the problem that comes in, like let's say that my ex bought me a dog, or he adopted a dog for me as a surprise from the shelter, and his name is on the adoption paper. But I've taken care of this dog for the last however many years. But the divorce turned ugly, and the husband, my ex is, sort of spitefully saying, "Well, the dog's mine. My name's on my name's on the paper." Often that ends up being the deciding factor legally. So that's why these laws are changing, so that regardless of who actually paid for the animal, um, that the person who the animal hopefully is bonded the most with. Maybe we'll talk more in more detail about it. But so that's why these laws are changing, and that's why they need to change. It's entirely appropriate that they change, and I am hoping to create a bit of awareness about not the laws not going so far to the other side that people um, that they're literally treating their dogs exactly like human children, because they're not. So that's kind of where all of this is heading, and the direction it's moving in.
Can you talk about that? Because I know before we recorded, you talked about, don't treat Rover like a child. I mean, realistically, they're not. So, what do you specifically mean by that?
By not treating dogs like children, so there's a few different ways to look at this. The one is that for a lot of people, their dogs hold the same emotional place that children do. And I'm fully aware of that. I've spent 2 decades working with people and their animals. It's like this, it's a real thing for people. But from the dog's perspective, something like a divorce or a separation, it's not something that they can, of course, have a concept of, because they're animals. So what happens for some people is I hear them getting into this sort of um, explaining to the dog in words what's happening. Like, okay, Fluffy, you're going to go with your dad, and I love you a lot. I'm going to pick you up on Saturday, and it's okay. And so that sort of practically, that having that attitude and and expressing your love for the dog in the same way that you would for a child really stresses dogs out, because dogs do not speak English. I hate to break it to everybody, but they don't. They can learn commands, and they copy our moods, but when you start explaining things like you would to a child, all the dog picks up is you are super stressed about something. Something is wrong. Mom or dad, whoever's saying the emotional goodbye, is worried about what's happening next. So therefore, the dog is going to get worried as well. That's how dogs operate, and they navigate with their owners. So on a practical level, that's one thing that I mean, to not overly humanize the dog. But in divorce, in the actual world of divorce, the a common trend now is, if people separate, that they want to do a shared custody arrangement with their pets, with their ex. So just like with children, maybe one party gets the dog 1 week and then they swap every other week. Some people do every other month. Some people do, it can be any sort of any sort of arrangement that you want to come to. But what it means is that one half of the party isn't really willing to say goodbye to the animal. This can work in some cases, but not in all cases. If people have children, and the children are moving back and forth between two, the mom and the dad, for example, or mom and dad, just the two people, then for many dogs that the children become the consistent factor in their life. They kind of get the routine, like they're following the kids wherever it is that the kids go. And the same goes for if couples have separated, but the couples are the two people are genuinely peaceful with each other. Like they're not keeping the fight going endlessly between them, and the handoffs are relaxed, and they're pretty peaceful, and there isn't sort of what is harmful for dogs, and from a behavior side, are overly emotional separations and reunions. And this is what I see a lot
Oh
in my
yeah.
behavior practice, where it's like every time you say goodbye, mom is crying, or they're shouting at each other, and and the picking up, and then
I, I I'm laughing because been there, done that. I was a horrible ex-husband, so I am guilty as charged of all those.
yeah. So and I mean here we're skipping off on a whole other tangent, but a lot of the time people aren't also willing to say goodbye to the dog, because the dog is the thing that's keeping you hooked into your ex, even if the hooking is a fight, even if it's just not actually willing to let the relationship genuinely be over. This poor dog becomes the currency between two people who are unable to just take a breath and really finish it. A fight is as intense as love sometimes. It's just the other side of it. So all of those things can play a factor in what I say overly humanizing the dog. And the other way to step back from that is to really ask the question, what is best for the dog in this situation? If we can sort of take the King Solomon story of what is actually best for the
Hmm.
dog. Do I love this dog enough to say goodbye? Does my ex have a better living situation, a better house, whatever it is? Then what? Can you look at the whole thing from the dog's eyes, not just yours?
Yeah, and I can only speak of my situation. When I got divorced, we had a Australian Shepherd, and here in my home office, I can look and I see, and I'm gonna try not to cry because um, there's a picture when my son was, I think, in first grade with Kiwi was her name, which we always found funny because Kiwis don't come from Australia; they're New Zealand, but that's another story.
Well, and
But
Australian shepherds don't come from Australia either, Tommy. I hate to break it to you. They come from
oh, enlighten
California.
me, enlighten me. Really?
Really, really. Okay, so here's a tangent. I've had Australian
Love it.
shepherds. I've had Australian shepherds my whole life. Okay, so Australian shepherds were actually developed in California, and they were bred to herd sheep that were imported from Australia. And the sheep that had been imported from Australia were very, very pushy sheep, and they weren't as receptive as the sheep that were coming more from England and Europe. And those kind of sheep could be moved easily with border collies. Border collies just stare, and the sheep respond to that. However, as you'll know from having an Aussie, Aussies bark at everything. They bark and bark and bark and bark and bark. And if something interesting or annoying is happening, they bark at it, because that's how they were bred to move the very stubborn Australian sheep. Hence the name Australian Shepherd from California. So let's just burst that bubble right there.
Thank you, Karis. Oh my god, that is. You know what? I know we're only like 15 minutes, and that's a mic drop right there. Right there. That is just knowledge dropped. That is beautiful. I'm gonna definitely be sharing that knowledge. That is,
Good.
oh my gosh. You
I'm
just,
so glad I could help you.
wow. Wow. Um, but we digress now. So when I got divorced, I the job um, was for me. I travel 100% of the time, so it didn't uh, make sense for me to have Kiwi because I had no place to live other than hotels. The weekends I had my son, but it was very um, I don't know what the word is, but it was very stressful for me because she was my dog. I mean, I was the one who took her to obedience school, and I was the one who took her to agility training, and wherever I went, she went. She was just my wing dog, and so for the divorce, it was like what you were saying. What makes best for the pet? What makes best for the kids? And in my situation, it was she would have to stay with my former spouse, and it was one of those situations where it really hurt because I felt like such a failure that I didn't have a job where I was able to be home, being able to spend more quality time with my son, spend time with Kiwi. So I mean, it really as an adult, you really have to adult in those situations where what is best, and it will hurt, but you have to do what's best for the family. And again, in my situation, what was best for my family was Kiwi staying with my former spouse. But the cool thing is, when I got this townhome, which was a mile from where my son lived, and I'm going to say a higher power intervened. For some reason, I had the only townhome that had a doggy door. So that was like, hey, I was meant to have a dog here. So we did have from time to time what we called sleepovers. We would have Kiwi and my son Connor, um, for weekends. So it it hurt, taking them both back to my former spouse, but at the same time, I'm trying to hold it together. Oh my gosh, this is therapy 101. Thank you. Please don't charge me. But again, you have to think what is best for the family. And I think that when we get caught up in, court, we're not thinking that way. We're thinking more of how can I get revenge from that person or on
Yeah,
that person.
for sure. And you made, I mean, thanks for sharing. I mean, seriously, thanks. It's it's always so important to hear those stories from people because other people need to know that other people go through it. And what was nice about the story that you told, and this is a lot of my job is to separate the emotion you felt around feeling like a failure and feeling like what you had done up until now had been a mistake because if or something because your life maybe should have looked different than it did. And Kiwi represented was obvious, of course the feelings for her were real and genuine, but it's also when the feelings for a dog get connected to so many other feelings that are not actually about the dog, that's where things get so confusing and so much heavier because the dog represents so much more than itself. And in doing that, it's very hard to make a clear decision. So for you to have sat in the place of Kiwi representing what she did and still saying, but for her, that's actually the right thing. Because the other option is to dig your heels in and say, listen, screw you, I'm keeping the dog because you can't sit with that. And that's where the animals end up suffering. So it was the right thing for her. And the truth is, as I'm sure you saw in the sleepovers, Kiwi was fine, right? Totally
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. Oh yeah.
And this brings up another very important point that I think people need to hear that is sometimes hard to hear, which is Dogs can say goodbye a lot easier than people can. When something like this happens where there is a goodbye and you have to, rehome a dog or say goodbye to a dog, the dogs don't normally sit and pine for their owners the way that we do, even just in our hearts. They might be a bit confused for a few days and they might kind of wonder what's happening, but they're actually I say dogs are like little Buddhas, they're just kind of in the moment. and
That's
and they
beautiful. I'm writing that
they are,
down.
yeah.
They are.
So they are, and it's so nice to know that. It's like, yes, you can suffer and it might take you a long time to deal with that emotion, and that's fine, but don't assume your dog's having that same experience, because they're not. What does really stress dogs out is if there are kind of random, like if you can imagine, like in a romantic movie where someone just drives across town because they have to see their lover, or someone that they just have to tell them to their face, I love you so much. When people do that with their dogs, that is what stresses the dogs out. And that's what makes their life difficult. If there's strange, random, emotional little visits where the ex will say, listen, I just have to come and see Rover to make sure that Rover's okay. Rover is fine. You're not okay. But if you go and Rover hasn't seen you for a month and suddenly there you are bawling your eyes out, or angry or something, then Rover's going to spend the next 2 weeks sitting at the door going, was he coming back? What happened? That sort of thing. So that is where people need just to understand how dogs interpret things so that they don't make it harder on their dogs than it is. I say, if you're going to say goodbye to a dog, you should do it like taking off a band-aid. Just do it. Just say goodbye and leave. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's easier on the animals than drawing it out.
Great. Now I feel like a bad puppy dad
No.
because on the Monday mornings when I'm leaving for my flight, there have been occasions where Otis is my joke is when people say, "Oh, what kind of dog he is?" I go, "He's a purebred Heinz 57 mix." And one lady, so I was at the dog park with Otis, and I said that joke to a lady, and the dog park is essentially square, and it's a good size. And I noticed that she was walking with her husband, and I heard him say, "What are you Googling?" And she said, "Oh, Heinz 57 mix." And I just put my head down and just started laughing because it was a joke. It was a joke. But um, Otis is what we think, and we haven't done the test yet. We think he's, I guess, California Shepherd dude, a little bit of Australian Shepherd, and maybe I'm trying to think another dog that has a longer body. But anyway, so there are times where I'm waiting for my ride to take me to the airport, and there would be times where I'm sitting on the couch and he'll come from the bedroom and just put his head in my lap, and I'm looking at him going, "You're not making this easy, dude. I mean, I gotta go. I'll see you on Friday, but you're not making this easy." So now I'm feeling, you know, all the years of being in Catholic school are now coming back, having the Catholic guilt. Now I'm going to feel guilty saying, "Nope, go back to the bedroom. Daddy's leaving." Oh, don't even say dad. Oh, I can't.
It's very
I'm just
complicated. It's
playing.
very complicated. I don't.
Yes.
and and this is the tricky thing about dogs, because dogs do, they understand routines, they understand kind of rituals, so they know
Yes.
when when you pack your bag it means this, when you put those shoes on it means that. Of course they
Yeah.
know these
Yes.
things.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's also okay. I mean, I've got, of my four dogs, one of them is a poodle. It's the most fabulous, clever little dog. And if you've ever seen poodles' tails, they naturally curl up on their back. Like when they're just, a poodle's neutral tail is sort of curled up on its back. And
Okay.
the poodle's name is Bear. And I
Oh.
say but he asks a question with his tail. So when I get my purse or I get my bag, and he looks at me and he drops his tail to go, am I coming to or not? And I either say, go to your bed, and then the tail completely drops and he goes to his
Oh,
bed like I've sentenced him to a prison sentence. Or I
yes.
say, go to the car, and then poodles don't walk, they prance. So he prances to the car. Yay, going to the car. So I mean, of course, dogs they get all these things. That's why we love them so much. They respond to moods. Their instinct says that they should do whatever the pack is doing. So it's like, cool, it's time to be excited, or it's time to be angry, or it's time to dig in the garden, or it's time to sleep. Let's all do it together. There's always this sort of group, whatever it is. And the sadness that Otis is sort of, oh, I know you're leaving, Dad. That's fine because he does know you're leaving and you're coming back, and this is the routine that you have. What
Right.
wouldn't be okay in that moment is if you really if if you're genuinely stressed and feeling tearful and like, I'm really, really sorry, because that does stress the dogs out. It's like, kiss him on the head and say, I'm sorry, dude, life's terrible. You'll be fine. And
Yeah.
just keep it as casual as you can. And that is a lot easier, than I always say. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, people think I'm so cruel. I say, don't say goodbye to dogs. Dogs don't say goodbye to each other. Just go out the door. It's fine. Like, goodbyes freak dogs out sometimes.
I'm loving this. This is again. I feel that you're not necessarily talking about dogs, but I don't want to be an egomaniac, but I feel like you're talking about me and in my my again. It feels like a therapy session that I've needed for a while. Do and you're talking about the pack. Um, do dogs get overwhelmed? And this question comes from I will notice that when we go to the dog park, and if there are, and I can't give you a specific number, but if it feels like if there's too many dogs, as I'm watching Otis, it feels that he's overwhelmed, that there's just too many packs and too many dogs. In your experience, do dogs get overwhelmed?
Totally. Absolutely and completely. They get utterly stressed out in chaos. So if a dog is quite young, if it's sort of an adolescent, kind of 10-month-old Labrador who just thinks everybody is great in the whole world and they want to say hi to everyone, I mean, it's a silly example, but it's kind of true. That sort of age and breed of dog can really enjoy the chaos. Like some doggy daycares, I tell people doggy daycare is not for every dog. It's for very social dogs, but dogs who are older or don't really like a lot of dogs, they find daycare very stressful. And the same with the dog park. So for dogs that if it seems like if there are too many dogs running around, the reason that dogs get overwhelmed is it's potentially dangerous because fights can happen that way. It's very
Hmm.
easy for things to tip over. So if you have a dog, any dog, I'm going to use Otis as an example, even though I've never met him, his instincts might be saying, hang on, I'm not part of this action. I don't know if I should avoid it. I don't know if I should try to stop the play, because you do get dogs who will, I call them the play police, like they'll want to try to stop a big busy group because it isn't safe necessarily. That is sometimes where dog fights can happen. So fully dogs can get overwhelmed. And if you have a sense that your dog is overwhelmed, you should just walk away. You shouldn't, the worst thing to do is to sort of sit still and expect them to sit next to you, because that's even worse, because then they feel like they're a target. So walk away. Give them the space that they need, because it is a very imagine going into a nightclub that you've never been to a nightclub before and everyone's thumping around and dancing. Yeah, if
Yeah.
if you're not a nightclub person, this is a terrifying thing, right? So it's a
Mhm.
similar thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I am a true introvert, so yeah, I'm not a nightclub person, and I would uh, because and I've learned this from other people about like you can tell the human is very anxious and stressed, and that filters down to the dog. And so I am one of those people that I don't like crowds. I love. I'm such a walking oxymoron. I love live music, but I don't like concerts. And because I don't like crowds, and I think it's, I don't know, maybe a sixth sense, but I can feel when Otis is in that situation where it's too crowded, and I've tried, I've read, and I love being able to speak to you, because you can give our, not only myself but the listeners, some great tips. I love watching dogs body language and try to interpret what's going on. And I've been able to recognize with Otis, number one, when he's getting a little overwhelmed, and number two, when he's like, all right, I'm done, can we go home? And I think that's, in my opinion, you're the expert, luckily, um, being able to sense and being able to read body language with dogs, I think, it only helps both the owner and the dog.
Body language is the only language dogs have. So I try to educate people as much as possible about how dogs do speak to us, because they can only speak with their eyes and their ears and their lips and the position of their spine and their how the moving their feet. And once you understand the way that your dog is speaking, then, as you said, you can, to me, it's kind of it's like almost a respect thing. It's like, okay, he's asking to leave now. In Otis's language, he's saying very clearly, Dad, I'm not having fun anymore. Let's go home. And if you
Right.
can observe that, the cases I work, when I work with dogs that have bitten or attacked dogs or hurt people and attacked children or all sorts of really tricky things, the dogs always warned the owners how they were feeling, but the owners didn't pay attention, they didn't notice it. A million kind of things, but dogs always warn you as much as they can that something is wrong or they are feeling stressed. And even though this is just a caveat that I always like to share with people because it's so important, that when it comes to dogs, especially dogs with children, but also with other dogs, when a dog growls, okay, growling means they need space. That's the only way a dog can say, I am not comfortable with what is happening now. Please go away. Growling is not, in and of itself, growling is not aggression, it's a warning. And what happens for many parents is if a dog growls at a kid, the instinct, which I understand, I've got kids, like I completely understand the instinct. The instinct is to shout at the dog or hit the dog or how dare you growl at my child. And if that happens enough times, you end up with a dog who simply doesn't growl anymore. Doesn't mean they're happy with the child. It doesn't mean they feel safe or that they feel like being around the child is a good thing. They've just learned that their warning system gets them punished. And over time, that is where you end up with these dogs that really don't exist. I call them mythical dogs, that the dog bit without warning. They did warn you for a long time, but you just missed it. So, in saying that, I don't mean, obviously, if you have a dog that's growling at a child, you need to get qualified professional help to work with it. Obviously, don't just ignore it. But punishing it is absolutely the complete opposite wrong thing to do. It's just a dog's way of saying, "Whoa, help, help, get it away." The dog kid's pulling my ears or whatever it's doing.
Something I recently learned is, I mean, especially as parents, we're so used to saying to our kids, no, no, but not explaining why we're saying no, and especially with our pets. So one of the things I've taken upon to help Otis was, instead of just saying no. So for example, uh, this morning here in my office, he was digging into the carpet, and instead of saying no or stop, I would say, stop digging, stop digging. And from what I've read, this is hopefully helping, in Otis's case, to understand, oh, he's telling me to stop and stop doing this, versus just saying stop. Well, what does stop mean? Stop what? Standing? Stop sitting? Stop. So Am I doing the right thing?
What you're doing, Tommy, is you're naming digging. So you're putting digging on cue. So no, you're not doing the right thing. I'm sorry.
Ah, crud.
So let me give you a different example to explain why that won't solve the problem.
Okay.
When a dog, this happens to a lot of people, a dog runs and jumps on you, and then you say down. Dog does it again. They jump on you. You say no down, or you just say down. If that happens enough times, what will happen is you will have, so the way that dogs learn words is they connect the word to the action they hear at the time. So if you say down when the dog jumps, you're teaching the dog that jumping up on you is called down because you're connecting those two events.
Okay. Makes sense.
This,
Makes
the
sense.
same the same thing happens at the park. If your dog runs away and you just go come, come every time the dog runs away chasing a bird, you're teaching your dog that come means run away because you're saying it as that's happening. So you correct in the beginning of your thought process is correct that saying no doesn't do much. The best approach when a dog is doing any behavior you don't like is you have to rather tell them what they should do. So adding anything, eventually Otis will just think his name is no after a while, like half the dogs I see. They just think their name is stop it,
Exactly.
no. It doesn't do anything.
I
So
think a lot of kids are named that too.
fully. So a better approach, instead of just saying stop digging, would be to give him something else to do. Clap your hands, uh, distract him from the digging on the carpet action, which he's probably doing to get your attention, and
Right.
instead give him uh, a more appropriate thing to dig on, like a snuffle mat, or give him something to chew on, or give him an appropriate option instead of that, or walk out of the room. That's another thing to do. That sometimes stops it immediately. Just
Okay.
just he's got to learn with time that digging doesn't get dad's attention. It gets either no attention or other behaviors get better attention. When he's chewing on a bone or something, or when I say bone, I just mean any appropriate chew thing,
Hmm.
whatever's good for your dog that's safe and healthy. Give them more attention for chewing on the right things or doing the right activities or playing fetch. And the wrong stuff, if you're really boring about it, they usually stop. Unless it's really delicious, then you've got to be more clever than that.
Just a side note on that. I remember when we first got Otis, and he would jump on my wife, and she would just say to him, "I'm walking away." And now, with your help, if he is digging here in either upstairs or here in my office, I'm gonna try that because that gets his attention. Because oh my gosh, somebody walked away. I want your attention, but I must, and I'm trying to, be in the dog's mind. I must have done something wrong there for them to walk away.
Dogs are they're very into cause and effect.
Mm.
So it's like if this behavior gets a good result, I'll do it. If that same behavior gets a bad result, I will stop. And you walking away is not, it's not like you're kicking him in the head. It's just like, oh, dad's left, darn it, and he will stop. That digging action. So dogs dig when they're excited. It's a super fun thing to do if they've got a lot of energy in their body. They like to dig on stuff. A couple of my dogs, when they're excited, they go and dig on their beds, which they're allowed to do in my house. I think it's cute to say, "Where are we going?" and they dig on the beds. So it's just a way to get rid of extra energy. But if he's doing it only when you're in the room with him, he's doing it because it's getting your attention. So I would try to catch him before he digs and tell him to do a trick, or tell him to bring you a toy, tell him to roll over and play dead, or if he knows any tricks like that, I don't know, so that he has a different way to get your attention. So teach him we call it teaching it an alternate behavior in behaviorist language. Teach him an incompatible behavior. Like, in other words, he can't dig the carpet if he brings you his favorite teddy bear. So tell him to do that rather than the carpet digging being something that gets you immediately turning around and getting, talking to him and getting excited.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy because I'm going to be using all these tips and tricks. starting today. Um, Karis, so I don't want to be Pollyanna. I don't want to say that we've got unicorns hanging out on rainbows, pooping skittles, but a lot of people feel that we're coming out of the COVID. With your business, were you seeing more of your service due to COVID, and not just married couples, but couples in general?
I really was with both just helping people with their behavior problems, definitely with divorces. And I think part of that is because people adopted dogs kind of it's like we people started hoarding dogs and toilet paper. Like, quick, get the dog, get the toilet paper, get some dogs. So people ended up with dogs that possibly they wouldn't have had if the world hadn't turned upside down the way that it did, because people were spending time. There's been a lot of divorces. It's either babies, they're divorces, or puppies, or one of the three. So yes, the short answer is yes. I have a lot of people who have animals and are now separating, who need some help from it. What happened for me, with which I did for so many people, is because of the lockdown, and because of what happened with the world. I just started seeing people, because everyone was Zooming. So I just started seeing people all over the world, like so many people, because it doesn't matter if you're down the road on Zoom or across the world. The effect is the same. And I've spent so many years working with people and dogs that I don't really need to see the dog to help people, because seeing the dog, especially when it comes to divorces, when I do see people in person, it's like the sort of this attempt, like, no, see, Rover likes me, no, Rover likes me. It actually confuses it. So even when I see people in my office, I say, don't bring your dog. I don't actually need to see it. It's going to make everybody confused and stress out the poor dog. So it's not actually necessary.
Or maybe you'd rather see the dog than the humans.
Well, yeah, but that's always the easy part.
I want to piggyback. What's the strangest divorce or separation you had to deal with? I mean, it could have been I don't know, a exotic animal, or just something off the wall. What's been the most unique one that comes to mind?
The most unique was actually with a parrot. It was with an African gray parrot. The challenge with this particular bird was that there was a boyfriend and girlfriend, and they'd been together for many years. The parrot had would speak like the girlfriend, but was bonded with the boyfriend. So it was an unquestionable, when they separated, that the bird was going to stay with him. However, a few months later, this man got a new girlfriend who was horrified to find out that the bird spoke just like the ex-girlfriend. and and wanted this. She really couldn't handle it. It really kind of pushed all of her buttons. She said, "I love you, sweetie," and how the bird would speak like love, very sweet, very sweet sentences in this woman's voice, and the new girlfriend really couldn't handle it, and they, can I train the bird to stop, and maybe it should go live, and she was so upset. She's just felt very threatened by the presence of this bird, and what it represented, really. So she wanted maybe the bird should go back with the ex-girlfriend. And so in that situation, I was just trying to be sort of a word of calm to this woman, to just say, listen, first of all, the dog loves your boy. I mean, not the dog, the parrot loves your boyfriend. And doesn't that make him a wonderful man that he's bonded with his parrots? Parrots are not easy pets. So it's quite sweet that he was so devoted. So that was really funny. The truth is, the relationship didn't last. I think she was just insecure about more than just the bird, but the bird was the most obvious one.
If you could see me, this is my shocked face that relationship didn't last. So,
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah,
um,
but yeah.
that's a great story because it just tells you, how we humans are devoted to any kind of animal.
Yep, definitely. And a lot of people, I what I love about my job is helping people understand what it means also to do the best thing for their dog, because for a lot of people they assume that shared custody is best for the dog. It's not everybody I see is kind of so overwhelmed and angry that they just want to keep the dog at all cost. A lot of people just really want to do the right thing, and the assumption is, for example, that shared custody is the right thing to do. And again, sometimes it is. People, I don't want people listening to think that it's something I never advocated, because it really just absolutely depends on each family and each situation, and the dynamics are always different. So it's fun's maybe not the right word, but it's very rewarding to
Mm.
help families navigate it, and kind of work with, going forward, really what works well. And most of my work comes from other mediators who know what I do, and they have clients, or from divorce attorneys, and there's a couple, and there's an animal involved, and just a little conversation, and some guidance, understanding how dogs think, goes so long in just calming down the, as you said for your own story, how much emotional significance the dogs carry that isn't actually all there is to carry. People need to go, they need to do their own self reflection, or go to therapy, or do something to figure out, what does the dog actually represent? Am I just trying to hurt my ex to keep it? Is this the, it's so easy. People, you know your spouse so well. If the dog was the most important thing to that person in the house. And if you really, really want to threaten them or hurt them, the dog might be the thing that you would, try to fight for, or to try to take people, um, to that would sort of be the most horrible thought, that someone might take the dog. And people do it, consciously or not. I mean, some people very consciously do it, and of course other people don't even realize it, but that's why the conversations are necessary.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just this past week, a couple of upcoming podcasts that I'll be releasing, the thing we talked a lot about was, before getting married, talking about your finances. And a lot of couples, when they get married, they don't talk about that. They don't know what each other, as far as baggage goes. But I believe this is another conversation, especially when you do have, a situation where, you adopt a pet, and unfortunately the marriage doesn't, last. That's a difficult conversation. I mean, it's like, you can sit there and argue over the coffee table, but you're also going to argue who's getting Rover.
Yep.
So one of the things that I've went through, gosh, about 2 years ago, and this was very unique to me in my experience. And my mom is the one who brought it up, and that was, we had a chocolate lab named Duke, and Duke, God bless him, he lasted 16 years in 1 week. And my mom suggested, and I had never heard of this, and she said, you should do hospice for Duke for when the time comes. And I'm thinking, I was really confused because I didn't understand what this all meant. But what it meant was, and we used, and I have to give them credit, they were called Lap of Love. And I was in, just outside of Vancouver, Canada, and my wife calls me in tears saying, we have to put him down. I mean, he was just in pain. I mean, you could just see it. And so my wife said, you've got to make the call. And I'm like, oh gosh. So here I am, phone making this phone call, contacting Lap of Love to say we need somebody, and it's a beautiful process. They come to your house. It's not like having to take, your pet to the vet, and it's a beautiful moment. You get to live in that moment, to bring the Buddha back into this. You get to be present in that moment with your pet in your own house. And so that's what we did for Duke. But here's the thing I love about my wife. She has such a great heart. They had Duke when he was a puppy. So her former spouse was part of that. And so she actually reached out to him to say, hey, do you want to come over to the house and, spend time with Duke before, he goes to, what did she say? Something like, not happy place, but something nice. I mean, it wasn't, you know,
The Rainbow
it,
Bridge.
yeah, that's. I mean, it's perfect. And so the thing is, I had never heard of hospice for our pets, and so like I said, my wife reached out to her former spouse to say, "Hey, this is what's going on." He said, "No, no, I don't want to. Don't worry about it." Well, so Kiwi, uh, almost a few months later, um, I didn't know this until after the fact that they had put Kiwi down. And I don't know if this could be a statement for you or just a statement in general, that it would be nice, even though you might really hate your former spouse, especially if that pet was part of the family, and if you know it's time where you're going to put that pet down, ask your former spouse if they want to be part of that. I'm sorry, I went on a
Yeah.
soapbox.
Tom, people will think we sort of like prompted this beforehand, but we didn't. But so exactly what you said is something I always try to put in all of my pet agreements, which is an end of life plan for the dog. So even if the dog's 6 months old or 10 years old, whatever it is, that if one person is getting custody of Rover, that if Rover should get gravely ill or have a serious accident or simply come to the end of his life, that at minimum the ex is notified so that they're aware of what's happened, and yes, to be given that option of having the chance to say goodbye, but to at least know. I do two things, and when possible, that the end of life communication is there, and also that if for some reason, if the spouse who has custody of the dog is unable to keep the dog, that the first person who has the option to take the dog is the other spouse, the other ex, so that even so that that other person knows, like you could have known with Kiwi, that okay, Kiwi's gone, or my ex can't keep Kiwi anymore. I'm the first. I get a first option to say, then it should go to me, because I think that's fair in every situation, because it you do love them, and even if you have the strong enough heart to say goodbye because it's right, it's absolutely such a peace of mind thing to kind of have the respect to tell the person that this is happening, and this is, yeah, people should definitely know.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, kudos to my wife for. I wouldn't have thought it, but luckily I live with a not only a smarter person, but one who has a bigger heart than I do.
That's how we learn, Tommy. That's okay. We did. I
Yes,
had
yes,
I had this I had a similar experience, and also with an Australian Shepherd. Her name was Tess, and she was this lovely dog, the best dog ever, like all Aussies are,
like all of
and
them are. Yeah,
like all of them are, with a fuzzy butt. Yeah, was such a good girl, and yeah, when she passed away, her my ex, who I got her with, I also let him know, and we'd stayed in touch, and were on good terms, and I just sent him a photo of her, And it was, yeah, and it was sad for him, but he was really happy to have been included in that end of her life, even though he hadn't been part of the rest of her life for many years.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's difficult because, like you already said earlier, our pets can't really verbalize how they feel. They can't really explain, if they're not feeling well. And I remember when the first dog that my mom got, this Lhasa Apso named Christian, and my mom's in tears because she had scheduled to go, and this was, oh my gosh, 30 odd years ago, maybe more. And it's the guilt of, am I doing the right thing? Again, because an animal can't, say to you, I'm ready to go see the light, or what have you. So it is one of those, I think, one of the hardest decisions, we adults with animals can make.
It's so hard. It's such a hard thing, and and every situation is kind of a little bit different. Sometimes it's so obvious. It's like just so clear. Sometimes it's not, and it's hard. And I've had friends and clients and different people who, in my opinion, were really propping the dog up beyond what was fair to the dog because they were
Mhm.
unable to let the dog go. But of course, it's so hard to how do you how do you say that to somebody? So it's a very tricky thing. But I think what's so nice for like anyone like you who's had the experience of really the privilege really of sitting with an animal when they pass, they tend to go, in my experience, it tends to be so peaceful once the decision has actually been made. There's sort of this moment where the
Mhm.
animal kind of lets go. And I would just really encourage anyone who's listening that if you do have an animal and you do have to put it down, go with it. The thought to me of handing the animal just to the vet because some people say, oh, they just can't watch, or they can't be there, is that to me is quite, I don't understand that because the animal needs you in that moment. They really do. They kind of need you to say goodbye. And it's really so much more peaceful than sort of the panic of suddenly being without their parents or, without their owners is quite difficult. And the other thing that is nice for people to understand when animals get put down, if you have a lot of other animals in the household, what you should do, and if it's great if you can do like what you did where the dog was put down at home, let the dog be put to sleep and then leave it there so that all the other animals can smell it. Because
Oh.
animals, they understand death. What they don't understand is just disappearance. That's much more confusing for them. So even if you do take the dog to the vet to be put down, if you have other animals at home, if it's possible, unless it's hard if you've got a Great Dane, I know, but whenever possible, the animals, it's the most amazing thing to witness when they are with a dead animal that has been part of the family. They seem to absolutely understand what's happening, and they get there's a huge response. There's a fearful or a sort of a very confused, it body language I haven't seen before when I saw it for the first time. Let me put it that way. So what that tells me is the dog, something different is happening. The dog knows the dog is not asleep, or the cat is not asleep. Whatever it is, I had to do this once with I have lots of dogs and lots of cats, and one of my cats passed away, who was the best friend of my other cat, and I brought his body in so that my other cat could smell him because they'd just shared a bed with for years with each other. And he puffed up like he'd been shocked with an electric, like an electric socket, that sort of thing that cats do, and and reacted, but then he knew what had happened, and then he sat and looked out the window for about a week. And I if I could say he was mourning, that's what I would say he was
Mm.
doing. But And dogs do a similar thing, but I think that is much less confusing than suddenly a dog is just it just never comes home, you know?
Hmm. Well, after we're done talking, I'm gonna go upstairs and not only let Otis off his kennel, I'm gonna go give him a big hug. Um, I I want to say thank you. I've been wanting somebody in this. Well, I think you're the only one I know of in this field, um, Karis, and I want to say thank you so much. I mean, for the work you do. Ooh, I do feel like I just went through therapy, and it's too early for me to go pour a glass of wine. Um, but on that note, please let the listeners. How can they get a hold of you in your amazing, amazing work?
The best way to get a hold of me is probably just through my website, and my website is whokeepsthedog.com. Whokeepsthedog.com. You can find me on Instagram. It's just my name. It's at Karis Nafte on Instagram, or LinkedIn, but my name's a little confusing and hard to remember. So just Google whokeepsthedog.com. And I help people in the whole circle of divorce. So I work with people for the actual custody decision. And then I do a lot of work with people just as a behaviorist around the time of divorce to give people help, just kind of emotional support to the dog and behavioral support, so that during the stress of divorce, that the dog is kind of given what it needs, to be happy. So I work with people in all whatever's happening in that slice, in that tricky slice of life, I can help with.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time. It is time for the last question. Are you ready?
Oh boy, yes, let's hope so. Sounds like a big
All
one.
right. Um, I love asking this because as a interviewer, I want to know, how I can improve. And I think that's part of life. We always are looking for improvement. But as I keep asking this question, I realize I need to really change it because here's the last question. If you could step into my shoes, which is not true, I don't wear shoes in the house. I wear my feet or no socks. But if you could step into my feet, what would you have asked that I did not ask you? If you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked that I did not ask?
Oh my gosh, that's so difficult. No one's see, you're a great interviewer because no one's ever asked me that. That's a beautiful question. And I'm just padding while I think of a good answer because I can't.
There's no right or wrong answer.
I know. I'm just trying to think. Um, I think okay, what I would have asked is what piece of advice would would I give to people? What one piece of advice would I give to people who are going through a divorce with their dog?
So, what is the one piece of advice you would give to people going through divorce with their dog? Well, I mean, we can say pet, right?
Yeah, pet. Yeah, I mean, look, we've this what we're saying applies to cats as well, but a lot of most of my work is with dogs, so I'll stick to dogs for this final
Okay.
question, for this final answer. And the simple answer to this is that in all the stress and all of the everything, make sure that your dog gets enough exercise.
Hmm.
Unless you've got an old dog or a dog with physical troubles, then obviously not. But if you've got a dog that's fairly active, you'd be amazed how much people forget to take the dog for walks, take it for runs, do its normal thing. And then you get a lot of chewing up of furniture, digging up, running away, becoming a little bit aggressive, becoming um, seemingly having all kinds of reactions to the divorce, which is often just that the dog is really frustrated because no one in all the chaos is remembering to get him out to the park. So on a simple note, take care of your dog's mental and physical exercise. It's the best way to help them deal with stress.
I need to piggyback. I lied. All right. So, there's one more question now after hearing your answer. All right. So, with Otis, he does not like walks. he loves hikes. What advice can you give us? Well, let me give you a little bit more, because he'll go for walks if it's my wife and I, but he's not a fan if it's just one of us. And where we live, I mean, there's so many opportunities, so many places we can take him for walks. Is it just getting him to go
Does
and
is he
not
off the
stress
leash
him
on
out?
is he off the
On
leash on the hikes? Is that what's different, or is he always on a leash?
Nope, he's always on a leash.
Well, I'd say take him on hikes then.
Okay, I love that answer. Love that answer.
There's a lot more. To be fair, I can't. That is, that's a very quirky. My ears perked
Yeah,
up when you say that, and
yeah.
there's no easy answer to that. I'd need to actually do a whole. We'd have to do a whole other podcast on why Otis doesn't like his walks and how I can help you. So the short answer is, for now, take him on hikes, and then we'll have another chat, and I'll explain, and we'll discover what it is about the walks that he doesn't like.
Love it. Love it. Um, Karis, thank you so much for your time. I mean, this was just, what's today? Today's Thursday when we're recording this. You've just made my day. You've made my week. You've made my weekend. So thank you so much.
I hope I've at least made your weekend. I mean, that's great. That's great.
Oh,
Tommy, this
definitely.
was really fun. I totally appreciate thank you for having me on. And I love being able to share some of these ideas with people. I really appreciate it. This has been fabulous.